Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today it's going to be an interesting day. We have phase 4 of the Grip Secrets video. In the last 3 videos I basically taught you leverage, finger control of the club face. So these 2 fingers control the opening and closing of the club face. From there I taught you how to pull your thumbs and forefingers out of the golf shot by utilizing this muscle to hold the thumb to the forefinger. And the last video I talked about using the last 3 fingers to create extra grip strength to control the club face more, because there's an actual reflexive line in there that the tighter you grip it, the less movement you have to pronate and supinate your wrist, specifically your left wrist. So in this video we have to talk about the rest of the fingers, specifically the right trigger finger and its relationship to the shaft, and how each of these fingers, as I mentioned, Lee Trevino learned that the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pinky finger all influenced the ball flight. So I'm going to change the grip pressure for each of these fingers so you can see how they interact. But understand that the analogy I'm going to be using is that of playing, let's say, a guitar or some kind of musical instrument, whether it be the piano, etc. Each finger can play a different note: draw, fade, high draw, low fade, etc., etc. You'll have to experiment, because your path is going to be different than mine, to see how this will affect your ability to become a shot maker. But for those of you that are interested, this is essentially the last step of the grip that I'm going to teach. You'll have to take it from here and master. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit a stock shot. I'm going to put a shot tracer up, and then I'm going to walk through each finger. I'm going to change the pressure in each finger and put shot tracers up so you can see how each shot is affected. Now, as we get into driver, 3-wood, 5-wood, wedges, the inertia of the club changes. We have a little offset in the wedges, no offset in my mid irons and my long irons, and then a little offset in my 4-iron, and no offset in my driver 3-wood or 5-wood. So each club is going to be affected differently by the way that I pressure the rest of the fingers in the hand, including these 2 fingers here. So let's just start with the stock setup, which is going to be, everything's going to be maintained at the same pressure. So we'll call it, we'll start neutral 5 out of 10 pressure. So as I'm waggling, I have full control of the club, but there's a little bit of movement, no big deal. Let's see what that looks like with my swing plane, etc. So we're hitting into a pretty good breeze today. It's pretty cold out, actually. I kind of wish I would have worn a sweater here, but that was essentially my stock fade into the wind. So started at the orange flag and faded maybe 10-15 yards with neutral grip pressure in all fingers. So what happens if, let's say, I increase the grip pressure of just my pinky finger? Well, since we're into the wind, this is probably a good thing to do, and you'll see why in just a moment. So as you can see, it came out quite a bit lower. Still had the stock fade on it, but that's because that's my intended path. I like hitting the fade, especially with no offset. But what essentially happens when you tighten this finger down, watch the club face. The tighter I go with it, the more, and again, I'm just tightening this pinky. So if I take these fingers off and I just tighten the pinky, notice the club face turns itself down slightly. So that's how we hit lower trajectory shots. So in this case, the wind's pretty strong, so we're going to have to go even lower. So let's add a little pressure to both of these now and see what happens. And I want you to notice when I pressure both of them, now look, now it shuts down quite a bit. So as you can see from that shot, it came out lower. It had far less side spin because, again, I'm pressuring these two fingers. So the club's not really going to want to open up at impact. It's going to stay square, and it's going to go straight down my line. So on this one, we're going to actually aim at the orange flag, and we're going to add a third finger in there. So we're going to add all three of these. We're going to pressure them at about a 7. Let's see what happens. So as you can see, it went dead straight. Wind didn't even hardly touch it. And essentially what I was able to do is I was able to keep the loft of the club down through the strike, so the ball came out of a lower window with less spin. Now if I wanted even less spin, I would just smooth my swing out so that I didn't have quite as much of a strike, and then it would come out more knuckly. So now that you kind of understand that each of these fingers matters, what happens if we just tighten the middle finger? We're going to go backwards now. We're going to go middle finger, ring finger, and then pinky tightness and see what happens. So right now I'm just tightening the middle finger. Now I want you to notice when I do that, what happens. Club face slightly closes. Not much though, not much at all. Again, we're going to aim at the orange flag this time. Now if you notice, that ball tried to draw. The wind held it up and it wasn't able to draw, but what made that really interesting is that by tightening just the middle finger, for some reason at impact, the ball drew. Well, what you have to understand is that the middle finger, for someone with a inside path that plays a fade in an open club face, is literally going to cause the path to go rightward, more so than usual. And that has everything to do with the fact that the wrist joint, when you tighten this middle finger down, it tightens a chain of tendons and ligaments in your wrist that essentially prevent you from flipping, or in other words, it bows your wrist even more. But what happens if I just tighten down the ring finger all by itself? So when I do it in my grip, it kind of has the same effect, but it doesn't shut down quite as much. So if I go middle finger, that's how much it shuts down. If I go middle, or if I go ring finger, that's how much it shuts down. If I go pinky, that's how much. So each one going backwards seems to have a little less ability to draw the ball. So if I just want to draw it a little less than that and allow the wind to take it, I go to the ring finger, I tighten that down pretty good. We'll call it an 8 or 9 out of 10. And then I swing. And notice, now the wind can actually take it and let it fade with the wind. So it starts out straight, but at the end of the day, it ends up on the right side of the green. Pretty interesting stuff, right? Now, if you play a draw, this is going to change the way that it works for you, but this is a demonstration so you understand how it can work and what you're supposed to do when you start manipulating the pressures of these fingers. So now that we've kind of worked through these 3 fingers, I want you guys to think of it like an instrument. What happens if you tighten just these 2, or just these 2, or just these 2, or maybe just the trigger finger? What happens if you just tighten the index finger? Start messing around with it. Give it a shot. See what happens with your path and how the club face reacts. But from here, I'm going to show you one more cool shot, and we're going to call it a day, and it's going to be up to you guys to go out and work with this. But I'm going to start messing with these 3 fingers now. And even my pinky, I'm going to start tightening it and to show you kind of how that works. So if I were to tighten just these 2 fingers, I want you to notice as I waggle the club, there's very little recoil. Whereas if I loosen those fingers, notice the club can continue moving. So the tighter these fingers are, the less likely you are to actually flip it. The more likely you are to hit it thin, right? Because as we're coming through, if you can't get down to the ball, it's possible you'll thin it a little bit, right? So if we tighten these too much, look at that, I can't hit the ground now because I don't have the biomechanics free enough in my wrists for the ball to, or for the club to basically cause radial deviation in my wrist so that I can get down to the ball when there's shaft droop or toe droop. If I were to tighten just my index finger, leave these at about a 5 out of 10, but tighten this index finger down, watch what happens. It's kind of like a fishing hook, almost like you're fly fishing. See how that works? So the idea would be, maybe I need to add a little spin to something or take a little spin off of it. We can start messing with this finger. And what happens if I tighten down this pinky? I play an overlap grip, but if I start tightening down this pinky, things change. I want you to watch what happens to the club face when I just tighten the pinky down. Now notice it just de-lofts it, maybe a degree. So the ball's just going to come down a little bit, but it's not going to influence the release of the club at all. All it's doing is allowing you to de-loft the club just slightly. So I want you guys to go out there and work with it. And then hopefully you'll learn how to change your grip pressures to control your ball flight and become a shot maker. So on this last one, I'm going to hit a really, really low fade. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to tighten all 3 of these fingers down. I'm going to tighten my pinky finger down. I'm going to tighten down these 2 fingers and my index finger. So all 10 fingers are going to be basically a 9 or a 10 out of 10. I want you to watch what kind of shot comes out of this window. It's going to be extremely low, and maybe even a groove low as far as impact is concerned, so very shallow attack angle. Again, we're going at the orange flag. Let's see what happens. That was interesting. It came out low, but it rocketed up in the air. And the reason for that being is because when you start adding grip pressure, you basically increase the ability to hit down on the ball. And what that does is it increases the spin. So in the wind, I'm better off, like today we're into a pretty heavy wind, I'm way better off taking all 5 fingers and turning the grip pressure down to maybe a 2. So let's see what that does. So instead of going 10 out of 10 with the grip pressure and really putting that spin on the ball, if we take our grip pressure off and we just get it to where it's basically kind of loose in my hand, right? Toes kind of flipping over there. And then we swing smooth because we're in the wind. Let's see what happens. Nice low ball. Wind didn't really even touch it. That was a slightly thin shot, so we're just going to hit another one. Just try not to thin it quite as much, but with the same grip pressure. And again, we're going at the orange flag. Look at that. So now what happens is essentially you take spin off the ball. So you can hit penetrating shots through the wind that are knuckly just by reducing your grip pressure. Now, as you learn to master this, you can start playing notes. So we take maybe a 10 out of 10 with the pinky and a 5 out of 10 with the index finger. Let's see what kind of shot comes out on that. And just know that this is the shot that I typically hit when there's a lot of wind. As you can see, the ball barely gets touched by the wind, lands on the green, stops like a dime. So understand that as you learn how to manipulate these pressures, it's like playing an instrument. Okay, guys? I won't call it a flute because it's a little more complex than that, but definitely I would say it's very close to playing notes on a guitar. And I'm not a good guitar player, but I did learn the basics. And I would say that that's essentially what it reminds me of. So hope this lesson helps. I look forward to hearing your concerns, questions. But again, this is the last video in the grip series. Next, we move on to posture and how we can change the way we pressure the ground using torque to essentially change our shot patterns, increase our speed, etc., etc. So pretty exciting stuff coming up. Yeah, it's gonna be fun, guys, so stick around.